Of speech debate tonight at the CUNY School of Public Health over its selection of a Palestinian-American activist as commencement speaker next month. A group of rabbis in Brooklyn tonight defending Linda Sarsour as a strong proponent of Jews and Muslims getting along. But a local lawmaker wants her disinvited, saying she's anti-Israel. Eyewitness News reporter Tim Fleischer with the story. He's live in Harlem for us. Tim.
And Bill, that commencement address, as it stands now here on this CUNY campus, will go forward. But today, deeply divided positions over this speaker. CUNY's Graduate School of Public Health and Health Policy has invited as its commencement speaker Linda Sarsour, an outspoken Palestinian-American political activist and progressive. School officials in a statement say she was invited because of her involvement in public health issues in New York City and her position as a leader on women's issues. And also because of her active role as co-chair of the recent Women's March, which drew tens of thousands to Washington and other cities.
This is Linda Sarsour, in her own words, supporting violence, supporting terrorism.
But State Assemblyman Dov Hikind, in the strongest of terms, points to what he calls her inflammatory posts on social media and is calling for CUNY officials to rescind the invitation.
City University should be ashamed. They don't have the courage, they're cowards.
In dueling news conferences, a large number of supporters of Linda Sarsour from numerous organizations came to her defense.
Linda will not be intimidated, nor will we.
That's right.
An attack on Linda is an attack on us all.
Another speaking in support of Sarsour was City Council member Brad Lander, who is Jewish.
CUNY has a deep tradition of standing up for, of teaching, of defending, of protecting, of extending freedom of speech.
Reaffirming its decision to invite her to speak, the dean of the school said, "I hope you all join me in my firm view that a diversity of viewpoints and an open exchange of ideas is at the heart of our country's strength and our university's strength."
Bringing her in, you are putting the stamp of approval that this is kosher. And you know what? Right now, she's not kosher.
We are Linda! We are Linda!
CUNY's position, though, remains the same, the chancellor saying, but the fact that Ms. Sarsour might hold views that are controversial cannot be the basis for withdrawing an invitation to speak. And at this time, it doesn't appear we've heard the last of this. Additional rallies from both sides are expected.
Assalamu alaikum, may peace be upon you, brothers and sisters. My name is Linda Sarsour, and I am one of the national co-chairs for the Women's March on Washington. I stand here before you, unapologetically Muslim American, unapologetically Palestinian American, unapologetically from Brooklyn, New York. Sisters and brothers, you are what democracy looks like. Sisters and brothers, you are my hope for my community. I will respect the presidency, but I will not respect this president of the United States of America. I will not respect an administration that won an election on the backs of Muslims and black people and undocumented people and Mexicans and people with disabilities and on the backs of women.
So new controversy tonight concerning one of the top organizers behind the Women's March movement, which was supposed to represent a wide cross-section of women in this country. Linda Sarsour criticizes the Trump presidency while supporting Sharia law. Her views promoted by the official Women's March Twitter account, and she was one of the organizers. They say they will always have her back. But now some are questioning if she's the right messenger for women of this country. Sarsour has lashed out at other prominent women who are in favor of reforming some of the tenets of Islam. Sarsour's 2011 tweet, which has now resurfaced, went after these two very prominent women who have spoken out against Sharia law and in this vicious way. Read this for yourself at home. As she berates them and says that she wishes she could whip them and take away their body parts, it is vile, to say the least. Joining me now is the person who that was directed at, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, well-known author and activist and research fellow at the Hoover Institution and the founder of the AHA Foundation. Ayaan, welcome. Very good to have you with us tonight.
Martha, thank you very much for having me.
What is your reaction when you look at, I know you've read the text of that and everybody at home just read it as well. What's your reaction?
My reaction is that Ms. Sarsour is hostile to me, not because she knows me, but because she's a fake feminist. Ms. Sarsour is not interested in universal human rights. She's a defender of Sharia law. And the principle of Sharia law, there's no principle that demeans, degrades, and dehumanizes women more than the principle of Sharia law. And Linda Sarsour is a defender of that. She hates me, she hates Brigitte Gabriel because of that. And I want to ask Linda Sarsour and the women who put their trust in her, why did she not organize a march for Asia Bibi? That's the woman in Pakistan who's on death row. She is condemned because allegedly she did something that caused her to blaspheme. Or Miriam Ibrahim in Sudan, who was imprisoned. The 270 plus women that were kidnapped in Boko Haram, the Yazidi women who were subjected to slavery by ISIS. This is the times we live in. And these fake feminists who say they speak for Muslim women, they have never said anything about this. Linda Sarsour is not a defender of universal human rights. She's a defender of Sharia law. She hates me because I expose what Sharia law is. What Sharia law is what the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria is doing.
I mean, you have been a victim of genital mutilation, which is something that you speak out about quite a bit. It must be shocking to you to watch all of these women gather, in Washington under this woman's, leadership. What is your message to those women?
Well, I have friends there who marched, and when they spoke to me, I would say to them, listen, guys, we have threats, real threats against women, a real war on women. Our genitals are being cut. 140 million women have been subjected to genital mutilation. Child brides. We have women in China, for instance, the technology of looking at what is in your womb. I have a baby, and I had, 20 weeks, I could tell whether that was a boy or a girl. That technology is being used to remove girls. We are not marching against this kind of thing. We're not marching against mass rape in Europe. This is the kind of thing we need to be marching against, and we're not marching against that. If we're really interested in civil rights, human rights, female, the rights of women, we should not go with fake feminists.
Thank you so much.
What we're talking about now, Islamic terrorism. When you're watching the news this morning and you're hearing about terrorists in Syria, in Jordan, in Lebanon, at Boko Haram, in Sudan, in Nigeria, in Chad, in Libya, I can go down the list. Every single instant when you're watching the news, it's not Buddhist terrorists, it's not Christian terrorists. Yes, there are some crazy people who commit terrorism, but right now the terrorism on mass scales, the bodies piled up, the people being beheaded, even Muslims shooting other Muslims, like what we watched in Iraq because they did not believe them that they were Sunnis. That is barbarism on a mass scale, and that's unacceptable in civilized society.
As long as you clarify and you stand up and say that the fringe extremists of any faith are only a tiny minority in the larger faith, this is what we want you to talk about. When you talk about Islam and you talk about the Quran, 1.4 billion people across the world follow the word of the Quran. You just got to make sure that you're being specific when you talk about terrorism of any faith, but more specifically, Islamic terrorism.
They're not waiting to hear your opinion or my opinion. They want to kill us both. And this is why we must discuss how we can defeat the radicals who want to kill us, who are using the Quran as their source and justification for their murder.
It's been 16, almost 17 years since the horrific attacks of 9/11. And we still, as a community, find ourselves unprepared in so many moments. Why, sisters and brothers? Why are we so unprepared? Why are we so afraid of this administration and the potential chaos that they will ensue on our community? And we already saw their potential when they come out every few weeks. Muslim ban 1, Muslim ban 2, Muslim ban 3. They are relentless. They are persistent and consistent and want to see how much we as a community can endure and want to see who our friends are and how hard we're going to fight back against this administration. And I hope that when we stand up to those who oppress our communities, that Allah accepts from us that as a form of jihad, that we are struggling against tyrants and rulers, not only abroad in the Middle East or in the other side of the world, but here in these United States of America, where you have fascists and white supremacists and Islamophobes reigning in the White House. We have to stay outraged. Do not criticize me when I say that we as a Muslim community in these United States of America have to be perpetually outraged every single day. When I wake up in the morning and I remember who's sitting in the White House, I am outraged. This is not normal, sisters and brothers. Those people sitting in the most powerful seats in this country is not normal. So do not ever be those citizens that normalize this administration, because when the day comes that something horrific happens to us or to another community, you will be responsible for normalizing this administration. Our #1 and top priority is to protect and defend our communities. It is not to assimilate and to please any other people in authority. Our obligation is to our young people, is to our women, and make sure our women are protected in our community. And our top priority, even higher than all those priorities, is to please Allah and only Allah.
Hi. So this question is really important to me because I believe that women's rights are human rights. So I really want to know under what circumstances it's acceptable to say that I wish I could take their vaginas away. They don't deserve to be women. And just to give that context, that's one of your tweets off your Twitter.
So, let's give some context here because, you know, we have, this is an event organized by an Asian American, right? Let's get some context to this, what's going on here. Celebrating a community, right? Talking about communities of color who are being directly impacted at this moment. And I have a young white man in the back who is not directly impacted by any of the issues that I mentioned. You think that a copy and paste that he got from a right-wing blog. He doesn't even know if it actually came from my Twitter account because he has a screenshot of it. He never actually went to my Twitter account to see if it's actually there, right? That never happened. But let me just say this to you. You're college students. I was in my 20s, and when was that? 2011? People say stupid shit sometimes, right? I will be judged by my impeccable track record for standing for Black lives and immigrant rights and women's rights and LGBT rights. You judge me by that record and not by some tweet that you think I did or did not tweet 10 years ago or 7 years ago, whatever it was. So that's my answer to your question. Next.
One final point before we go tonight. Thousands of people across the country marched against Sharia law this weekend, protesting the brutal totalitarianism of Islamic religious law that subjugates women and calls for the execution of gays. Now, counter-protesters, they claimed this was Islamophobic. The leader of the Women's March even claimed Sharia law is reasonable. In Iran, if you blaspheme the Prophet Muhammad, you can be put to death. The executioners, they cite Islamic law. In the Sudan, if you're convicted of apostasy, you face the death penalty. The executioners, they cite Sharia law. In Saudi Arabia, women aren't allowed to drive, and if you do, you're thrown in jail. The enforcers, they cite Sharia law. Right here in the United States, women and young girls are the targets of honor killings. Their fathers, their murderers, they cite Sharia law. Little girls are the victims of female genital mutilation. The perpetrators, they cite Islamic law. Yet the co-organizer of the so-called Women's March, Linda Sarsour, remember her name? Yeah, she defended Sharia law. She called Sharia law reasonable. Now she claims this. She says, there is not one example of Muslims trying to impose Sharia law on anyone. No legislations, anti-Muslim rallies playing on the gullible. Sharia law is never forced on anybody. Tell that to the 500,000 young women and girls here in the United States who are subject to having their genitals cut off and their vaginas sewn up because Islamic teachings say it's a moral necessity. Tell that to the women in the Middle East who are beaten by their husbands because the Quran says that's okay as long as the rod is no thicker than a thumb. Tell that to the 9-year-old girls who are married against their will to older, perverted men because Sharia law gives child marriage a thumbs up. Tell that to the gay men who are shoved off the roofs of buildings because they're gay by Sharia law enforcers. Tell that to the Muslim women whose testimony in court that she's been raped must be corroborated by 4 other men if she wants the Sharia law court to believe her. Tell that to the grown Muslim women who aren't allowed to leave their homes, or go shopping, or drive a car, or talk to other men, or travel abroad without permission from their husband, their father, or their brother because that's what Sharia law dictates. Tell that to the young Muslim women here in our own country who were murdered by their fathers to avenge the family honor because Sharia teaches better dead than abandon Islam. Ms. Sarsour and all the rest of you counter-protesters defending Sharia law, tell me again how nobody is trying to impose Sharia law on anyone. And then tell me how on earth anybody in their right mind can stand on the street corner and pretend human rights are women's rights and women's rights are human rights while ignoring the atrocity perpetuated on women by Islamic supremacists under Sharia law. What you're doing, you're not standing up to Islamophobia. You're not standing up for religious or liberty or expression. You're certainly not standing up for women. You're standing with the oppressors, with the abusers, with the murderers, the wife beaters, with the gay killers, the child sex traffickers, the mutilators, the Sharia law police who seek to impose their rule on everybody in the world, or else, if we refuse to submit, they seek to kill us. Because that's just Sharia law.
Every time a terrorist murders an innocent person and falsely invokes the name of God, it should be an insult to every person of faith. Terrorists do not worship God. They worship death. If we do not act against this organized terror, then we know what will happen and what will be the end result. America is prepared to stand with you in pursuit of shared interests and common security. But the nations of the Middle East cannot wait for American power to crush this enemy for them. The nations of the Middle East will have to decide what kind of future they want for themselves, for their country, and frankly, for their families and for their children. It's a choice between 2 futures, and it is a choice America cannot make for you. A better future is only possible if your nations drive out the terrorists and drive out the extremists. Drive them out. Drive them out of your places of worship. Drive them out of your communities. Drive them out of your holy land. And drive them out of this earth.